Thank you for watching this week's video notes on the operators of 2030. For more information, please visit our website at focusintegration.com.
Okay, so if I asked you to close your eyes right now, and please don't if you're driving, and picture a factory, say, in the year 2030, what comes to mind?
Well, I think for most people, the mind goes straight to science fiction.
Right. I'm picturing this incredibly sleek, sterile, silent room.
hmm
It's just full of these articulated robot arms, whirring away, welding things with lasers.
And maybe there's one person.
Exactly. One lone human in a glass booth, sipping coffee, watching a wall of screens. We have this kind of collective idea that the future of manufacturing is just robots replacing people.
The lights out factory myth. It's this idea that we can just, turn off the lights, lock the doors, and let the machines run themselves.
Yeah.
But if you look at the actual data, and especially the report we're breaking down today, that vision is completely wrong.
Wrong how? Because, I feel like I see headlines about automation every single day.
Because the biggest shift that's coming in the next decade isn't the hardware. It's not the robotics. It's not even the AI in the way we usually think about it. It's the human element.
That seems counterintuitive. We usually hear that humans are the bottleneck.
It really does sound counterintuitive until you look at who is actually walking onto the factory floor. We're looking at this fascinating report. It's titled The 2030 Manufacturing Operator, Designed for the Tech-Native Workforce.
Okay.
And the core argument here is that the human isn't going away, but the human is changing so fundamentally that if factories don't completely redesign their systems, the software, the training, the whole culture, they're going to fail.
So our mission for this deep dive is to figure out who this tech-native operator actually is. We need to unpack why they're so different from, say, the workforce of 1990 or even 2010, and why the old way of running a factory isn't just inefficient for them, it's actually impossible.
To understand where we're going, we have to look at where we've been. The report draws a really, really sharp contrast between two archetypes. On one side, you've got the mechanical native.
Okay, so let's define that. This is the workforce of the 90s, the 2000s.
Exactly. Think about the environment they grew up in. These are the folks who, probably grew up fixing things with their hands. They were tactile learners.
The shade tree mechanic vibe.
That's it, exactly. They might have worked on their own cars, changed their oil, wired a plug, fixed a lawnmower.
Right.
When they walked onto a factory floor in 1995, they were comfortable with manual machinery. They understood physical troubleshooting. If a machine made some kind of grinding noise, they knew what that meant, physically, metal on metal.
There's a specific trait the report mentions about them that I found really interesting. Patience.
Yes. The mechanical native was patient with complexity. If a machine acted up, they saw it as an industrial puzzle.
A challenge.
A challenge, yeah. They were willing to dig in, get grease under their fingernails, open up the panel, and figure it out. They almost enjoyed the fight with a stubborn machine.
Because they had the mechanical context. They could sort of visualize the problem.
They had a foundational mechanical literacy. Now, fast forward to 2030. The tech native enters the workforce. This is a person who has grown up entirely in the age of the smartphone, the touchscreen, instant information.
This is the generation of the swipe, not the wrench.
That is the perfect way to frame it. The report is very clear about what they didn't grow up with. Mechanical repair, industrial wiring, clunky physical interfaces. But think about what they did grow up with.
Predictive systems.
Predictive system.
Like Google Autofill.
Precisely. Think about the psychology of that. You type 3 letters into a search bar, and the system knows what you want before you even finish the thought.
Yeah, it's already there.
You open a map, it predicts your route. They have spent their entire lives with tech that anticipates their needs.
And I'm guessing this is where the friction happens. Because you'd think, oh, they're young, they love technology, they'll be great at operating this complex, computerized stuff.
That is the trap. That is the assumption every bad manager makes. And the report points out this huge irony. Because the tech native is so used to good technology-like consumer-grade polished UI from Apple or Google, they have absolutely zero tolerance for bad technology.
So when they see a clunky industrial screen from 1998.
The mechanical native would tolerate that. They'd tolerate a blinking green cursor or a confusing text menu because they expected industrial work to be hard.
Right. It was part of the job.
The tech native sees a text-heavy menu or a nested screen, and they don't see a challenge. They just see a broken system.
They don't think, I need to learn this. They think whoever designed this didn't care about me, the user.
Harsh, but it's true. They just disengage. They're less mechanically trained, so they can't fall back on their wrench-turning skills. And they're way less patient with tribal jargon or systems that require you to just guess. If it's not intuitive, they check out. They assume the tool is junk.
Which brings us directly to the user experience, the UX of the factory. And UX is a term we usually hear for, like apps or websites, not injection molding machines.
Well, that's the problem, isn't it? We haven't been thinking about it. We just slap buttons on a box. And the report is really clear on what overwhelms this new workforce. It lists the industrial sins of design.
Let's go through those. What are the deal breakers?
Number one, text-heavy HMI screens.
And HMI is?
Sorry, human-machine interface. The screen that controls the machine. In most factories today, these screens are just walls of text. Pressure valve 4, sector 7, variance high.
It reads like an old spreadsheet.
It really does. It requires you to read, interpret, and then act. And that's a huge cognitive load. Then you have nested menus. You have to click settings, then advanced, then motor, just to change one little thing.
In the alarms, the report got really specific on ambiguous alarms. This feels like something that would drive me crazy.
This is a huge safety issue, actually. Imagine an alarm goes off, a loud buzzer. The screen just says, error 404.
Panic time.
For a mechanical native, that was a clue. Okay, 404, that usually means the pressure valve's stuck. They had the tribal knowledge. To a tech native, that is a total failure of communication. They just see a machine screaming at them.
So what's the solution? The report uses the term visual-first design.
It's about changing the language from text to visuals. Instead of a paragraph explaining how to load a part, you use a real-time animation on the screen.
Like a Lego manual versus a novel.
Or even better, dynamic highlighting. If a sensor is blocked, don't just say sensor blocked. Show a 3D model of the machine on the screen, rotate it to the spot, and highlight the sensor in red. Don't make them hunt.
It's the Google Maps expectation. I love this analogy in the source material because it just perfectly nails how we interact with the world now.
It's the gold standard. I mean, think about how Google Maps works. When you're driving and there's a traffic jam ahead, what does it do?
It doesn't just flash a light that says traffic. It says, there's a 10-minute delay, you're still on the fastest route. Or, hey, turn left here to save 4 minutes.
Exactly. It gives you context, prediction, and a solution. That is what the report calls predictive support. The 2030 operator expects the machine to behave like Google Maps.
Wow.
They assume it will warn them early before the crash
The
happens.
temperature is rising, please check the coolant, something like that.
Right. And if something does go wrong, it shouldn't just say fault. It should show the correct reset path, step by step. Step 1, open the gate. Step 2, remove the jam. It explains what went wrong, not just that something is wrong.
This brings up a really interesting point about trust. Not trust between people, but trust in the machine itself.
It's critical. If a machine lets an operator make a mistake that could have been prevented, or if it gives a vague error that leads nowhere, the tech-native operator loses trust in that system immediately.
They feel unsupported.
They feel unsafe, and once that trust is gone, engagement just drops off a cliff. They stop trying to optimize, they just try to survive the shift. They start treating the machine like an adversary.
So we have this new workforce. They need a visual, predictive environment. They need the machine to talk to them like a GPS. This has to completely change how you train people.
Oh, completely.
You can't just stick them in a classroom for 2 weeks with a binder anymore.
The death of the classroom. It's a major theme. The report introduces a specific metric that, honestly, it blew my mind. They call it the 6-hour operator transition.
6 hours? Wait, really? That seems incredibly short. I mean, for some of these jobs, training used to take months. You had the apprentice model?
It did. But the argument is that in 2030, a multi-week training course is just unacceptable. It's too slow, too expensive, and the tech native will not pay attention to a binder.
So how do you get someone ready in 6 hours? That sounds dangerous.
You move the training. It has to be in the flow of work.
So you learn while you're actually doing the job.
Guided directly at the HMI screen. The operator walks up, logs in, and the machine itself teaches them how to run it.
It's like a video game tutorial.
Yes. Think about playing a modern video game. Do you read the manual before you start?
Never. I just hit start.
And then the game pauses and says, use the left stick to move. You do it. Press X to jump. You learn by doing, in context. That's the model for the 2030 factory. It's not about giving the operator more time, it's about the system having a better training architecture.
So the screen just highlights the button that says press here.
Correct. The machine won't let you press the wrong button. And this extends to problem solving. The report talks about smart escalation.
What does that look like?
In the old days, if a machine broke and you couldn't fix it, you'd go look for the supervisor, or you'd go find Bob, the guy who's been there 30 years and just knows.
The Ask Bob method.
Yeah.
Very inefficient. And Bob might retire.
Exactly. In 2030, you rely on automated notifications. The system performs a technician layer handoff. It recognizes a complex fault, realizes the operator can't fix it, and automatically pings the maintenance tech's tablet.
And what does it tell the operator?
It tells them, this is beyond your scope. A technician has been notified. Please stand by.
That seems really important psychologically. It stops them from feeling helpless or like they failed.
Exactly. They aren't failing. They are managing the situation with the tools they have. It makes them proactive.
Let's pivot to the psychology of this worker a bit more. We know how they learn, but what motivates them? The report uses a word we hear a lot in tech, but less in manufacturing. Gamification.
I know. Every time I say gamification to a plant manager, they roll their eyes.
They think you mean putting Candy Crush on the controllers.
Gold stars for everyone.
Yeah.
Right.
But we have to distinguish fun from engagement. This isn't about making work a game. It's about how this generation processes feedback.
Okay.
They grew up with scores, streaks, instant feedback loops. Think about the Apple Watch fitness rings.
Oh, totally. I will absolutely walk around my living room at 11 p.m. just to close my rings.
Right. That is a feedback loop. They want to know, how am I doing right now?
So how does that apply on a factory floor? The report talks about telemetry. Usually we use telemetry to monitor machine health, right? Is the motor overheating? But here, they argue telemetry is a motivational engine for the human.
So you're showing the operator their own performance data in real time.
Exactly. A little dashboard in the corner of the screen. You've completed 50 cycles without an error. Your changeover was 10% faster than last shift. You're on a 3-day safety streak.
It satisfies that need for instant validation.
It provides clarity on what success looks like. If you don't show them the score, they don't know if they're winning. And if they don't know if they're winning, they get bored. And boredom, that leads to mistakes.
This connects to another concept the report highlights, which sounds a bit like an HR buzzword, but it seems really practical here. Psychological safety.
It's the invisible requirement of modern work. For the 2030 operator, psychological safety comes from clarity. They will not tolerate ambiguity.
Give me an example of unsafe ambiguity.
Okay, you're running a machine with $1 million. It makes a strange noise. The screen gives you a vague error you don't understand. You hesitate. The machine jams. The boss comes over and yells, "Why didn't you stop it?"
You feel blamed for something the system didn't explain to you.
That is a lack of psychological safety. And the tech-native workers simply won't tolerate that stress. They will quit. They can go drive for Uber where the rules are clear.
So if the alarms are clear and the guidance is predictive?
Then the operator feels safe. They know the system has their back. And the consequence is stark. Factories that fail to provide this clarity will suffer massive turnover. Those that do will see safer behavior and much faster skill progression.
It really emphasizes that ease of use isn't a luxury anymore. It's a retention strategy.
It's the single biggest factor.
So if we pull all this together, the visual design, smart escalation, training in the flow, we get to what the report calls the unified ecosystem.
This is the holy grail, the unified factory. It's a state where every interface, every alarm, every workflow matches across the entire facility.
So the screen on the packaging machine looks and behaves exactly like the screen on the molding machine.
Precisely. The buttons are in the same place. Colors mean the same things. Red is always stop. Green is always go.
That seems so obvious, but I know most factories are a patchwork of different vendors, different eras of equipment.
It's usually a mess. You walk 10 feet and it's like entering a different country. But fixing it creates what the report calls plug-and-play humans.
Oof. Plug-and-play humans. That sounds a little robotic, doesn't it? A little dehumanizing.
It sounds that way, I know, but think about the benefit to the human. In the old world, you were the press operator. If the press broke, you stood around. You were siloed by your specific knowledge of one machine's quirks.
You were trapped by your specialization.
Exactly. In a unified factory, the operator becomes cross-functional. Because the system provides the guidance, the Google Maps, the operator can move from the press to the mixer and be effective almost immediately.
Because the interface guides them.
Right. This allows for flexible staffing. Someone calls in sick, no problem, move Sarah from line 1 to line 2. The machine will teach her the specifics. It empowers the worker to be valuable anywhere in the building.
Which brings us to the evolution of the role itself. And this is my favorite part of the report because it completely reframes the job. The operator stops being just a task performer.
They stop being someone who just, feeds the beast. The report suggests new titles. We aren't calling them operators anymore. We're calling them system ambassadors, decision makers, or my personal favorite, capability amplifier.
Capability amplifier. That is a serious title upgrade. It sounds like something from a superhero movie.
But it reflects the reality. If the machine handles the repetitive tasks and the predictive guidance handles the troubleshooting, what is left for the human?
High-level judgment.
Exactly. Their job is to make high-level decisions, to interpret data, to manage flow. Their job is no longer to run the machine. It is to elevate the system.
They become a high-value asset. The conductor of the orchestra, not just one of the violinists.
And that is the ultimate shift. We aren't removing the human. We're upgrading their leverage. We're giving them superpowers.
So let's bring this all home. We started this deep dive saying everyone thinks the future is robots replacing people. The lights out factory.
And the summary from our sources is simple. That's wrong. The future of manufacturing isn't about machines replacing people. It's about better machines enabling better people.
Yeah.
It's about tech that makes the human faster, more confident, more capable than they could ever be on their own.
And the stakes are pretty high for the companies listening.
Oh, existential. The factories that design for this tech-native workforce, the ones that embrace visual design, gamification, unified systems, they will lead the decade. They'll have the best workers, the lowest turnover, the highest efficiency.
And the factories that stick to the old complexities, the trial by fire method.
They're going to fall behind. They simply won't be able to staff their lines. The new generation won't work there. It's that simple. You can't just build a better mousetrap anymore. You have to build a mousetrap that the 2030 human actually wants to use.
It's a fascinating look at how human psychology really drives industrial engineering.
It really is. It turns out the soft skills UX, psychology, motivation are actually the hardest requirements for the future.
Before we sign off, I want to leave you with a thought to mull over. We've talked about how this 2030 operator needs gamified feedback and these instant gratification interfaces like Google Maps telling them exactly where to turn.
It's a compelling vision.
But ask yourself this. If the workforce now requires machines to constantly guide them, predict their errors, and give them little dopamine hits for performance, are we actually making the workforce smarter? Or are we just making the machines better at, babysitting us? Or, to flip it around, is ease of use actually the ultimate form of sophistication?
That is the question.
Thanks for diving in with us. We'll see you on the next one.
Thank you for watching this week's video notes on the operators of 2030. For more information, please visit our website at focusintegration.com.